So welcome everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces. Tom, good to see you too. Thanks for being our Florida representative. And Jason, thanks for being able to jump on. I know it's been a little crazy around where you guys are at. So good to see your faces on here. So I would just like to open it up for those of you who don't know. I'm Kelly Scheld. I'm a part of our chapter relations team. I have Lawrence here with us today as well, and then Crystal, who will most likely be off camera. I know she's coming out of a few meetings as well today, so she's probably munching on some late lunch for us here. So I would like to open it up and just start with all of you. If there's anything specific you would like to bring to the group today. Oh, and Drew, I see you're from South Gulf Coast. Welcome. Thanks for joining us from Florida as well. I didn't mean to leave you out there.
No problem. Glad to be here. Glad the storm's gone. Wish I had power at my house, but other than that, we're good.
Well, thanks for being on. Thanks for letting me know that I might be a little blurry. It might be my camera, so I apologize. If it gets too distracting, I can definitely turn my camera off as well. But so one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was around committee work and the support that you're giving your committees. So one of the things we wanted to throw out was just to kind of talk about what committees your chapter has. I know when I've been talking with a lot of chapters recently, there's been a lot of discussions about, well, what committees should we have, or what are the most important ones to have? So for example, I think most people have a membership committee. And so again, around that type of structure, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and just sharing what committees you do have. And then if anyone has any questions about a specific committee, feel free to unmute, or we can talk about the logistics of a committee specifically. So if anyone would like to come off mute, otherwise I can just call on people. Chris, I see you're unmuted. So if you want to go ahead and get started, that'd be great.
Well, it's good timing because Jim is also on the call, the 2025 president for CAI Minnesota. But we've looked at our charters, and it's been something we've just passed at our last board meeting earlier this week. So we have 8 committees plus the LAC, and the LAC is out of our control. But so 9 committees in Minnesota. And we revised all of the charters so they allow, I guess, more concise instructions for the chairs and put a 2-year limit on the chairs. So some of our chairs have been there 8 to 10 years, and it gets kind of stagnant. And then we have a process now, and that'll go into effect in a few months. We're just having the board to sign them all, but it's been a robust procedure, good discussions with the chairs, getting their feedback, and having vice chairs set up so we can kind of keep changing it up over the years. But
keep the transition going.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to know what our committees are, you can rattle those off as well.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just throwing some out there. I know you've got a unique one that others might be interested in hearing. So yes.
Yep, and some of our older ones are, the membership committee. We've got a golf committee, which those are large committees. They do a ton. We've got an expo committee, an education committee. We also have the Social Gala and Vision Award Committee. Our gala is huge, and this year we'll probably be in the mid 500s for attendance. Then we also have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, which is relatively new, about 2 years old. And then our newest one is the Community Outreach Committee. So.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely. Go for it, Amy.
So Chris, I'm just curious. We went to our past president's council this year to ask about chair term limits. And I just wanted to know how that was working out for you. We had a 2-year limit that we were discussing as well. But we were concerned about the succession planning. So I was just curious to hear kind of how you guys are setting that up. I know you mentioned vice chairs. So is that the person that's like next in line for the chair's role? Just kind of how that looks for you guys.
Yes, and this is brand new. So we've only had chairs in the past, but it was brought up well, it was brought up by Jim Rosveld, who's kind of shaking things up. And it was reviewed by all of the board, and our lawyers went through it, but our vice chair is now going to be on, in line after 2 years, go into the chair, and then the chair will have to be a member of the committee, or can choose to be, but they do have to rotate it around. So that's
Okay.
brand new. We have not implemented it yet, but it is happening.
All right, good luck.
And speaking of limits, Kathy, if I remember correctly, Illinois has some term limits for their committee chairs too. Is that correct?
Yes, we try to stick to like a 2-3 year succession plan, having a chair and then maybe a co-chair to shadow them, and sort of then be able to keep that rotation moving. It doesn't work 100% of the time with 100% of the committees, but by and large, that's what we do try.
Yeah. Does anyone else have term limits on their committees, either by a nod or hand? Okay, I see a couple others do as well. Do you have any feedback around either success or challenges you've had with those limits?
We're just implementing, I mean, we've implemented ours, but we're enforcing them this year. We maybe have ignored them for a while. They've been on the books and it's a little conflict, but it's good and it's the right thing to do.
Great, thank you. Drew, since you're unmuted, do you want to, or Sarah, I see you unmuted. Did you have something else to say in regards to that?
Me?
Or Sarah, sorry.
No, I mean, I was just gonna add, the couple other committees, I don't know if it was mentioned before, but like a sponsorship committee has been really helpful. They look to fill some of those upcoming sponsorships that haven't been filled yet. And so both Oregon chapters have that. And then another committee that I actually found really helpful and I implemented it for Central Oregon, was to have a personnel committee. I've seen it to where in a couple different cases in different chapters where the CED needs an outlet. They need to be able to voice concerns, and when the board is, when they can't go to the board or they can't go to their boss, it becomes this issue and conflict. But if they had a separate personnel committee to go to that could be a separate voice and support for them, that I saw as very important. And so that would be another suggestion. It would be a board level type committee that gets established, and it's not used very often except for maybe complaints or maybe employment, the employment contract piece to that. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else want to share their committees that they have, or any committee structural piece that stands out to you?
Down in here on the Gulf Coast, we have our trade show, our golf, our membership, education, public relations, and our soiree, if you will, our gala committee. We don't have term limits. In fact, the past 3 years that I've been involved on the board, just getting committee members is tough. And so if you put term limits on the ones that are willing to volunteer, it's kind of like, what do you do when nobody volunteers? So does anyone else have that problem? And what's the magic golden ticket to get your committee members to volunteer? I mean, get your members to volunteer for committees.
We had to really hash that out. We formed a council this year of the past presidents. So we got all of the past presidents of the chapter together and had some discussions about some struggles that they may have had with committee chairs. Did they think there was benefits to those changes? Making sure that we had succession planning, and really what stood out in that discussion, in that forum, was that it was always a struggle to get good people to step up to be the committee chairs. And I guess our answer, or our theoretical answer, because this is all going into effect for 2025, is to make sure, like Chris was talking about, to have that succession planning so that you have a co-chair or a vice chair that is ready to take over as soon as that term limit is hit.
And I do want to verify too, when we're talking term limits, it's more for the chair of the committee so that not one person is completely running the committee for 10, 15 years and a person who might want to be at that level is getting roadblocked. So they're still able to serve and volunteer, but it's just that head person on the committee.
We're lucky. We have that core group that's always willing to volunteer, and we have new ones come in and that are excited and want to jump in and volunteer. And but it's just like it's the same group year after year after year doing the same thing. And nobody, I don't know if they think they can't, because we go out and we do a call for volunteers for everything, but we just don't get the members. They just don't want to be involved, I guess. I guess we could send out a poll or something and say, why don't you want to be on a committee? That might be a good idea, actually, but.
I
Yeah.
have a question. I'm sorry, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
A question. Do you find that, and maybe this is for everybody, do you find that there's specific committees that are more challenging to recruit for?
I don't think because we really don't have that many. The golf committee, you know, that's the same. I kind of look at that's kind of that's the good old boy group. You know, they've got it down pat. They all know what they're doing. Each one of them's got a task, and they go do it and they pull it off, and it's really good. You know, then there's the same group on education, and a few come in and say, I want to be on a committee. What can I do? I need points for this or whatever. But I don't. First of all, I don't see that.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, so.
I know for Los Angeles, our legislative support committee, our LSC, is always kind of difficult to find volunteers because they don't always understand the process. So we end up with the same few lawyers and the same few CEOs on the committee every single year.
Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
What I was gonna say is, and I'm sorry, because I did have to jump on a few minutes late. Here in Illinois, we, for a few years ago, developed the Volunteer Commission. And so after we have like our new member orientations, shortly thereafter, and we have them twice a year, we have a volunteer orientation. So if people are interested in serving on committees, they can come in. Basically, that volunteer committee is run by past presidents and people who have been around for a while and understand all the different committees, and they work with the newer members, or it doesn't even have to be a new member. It could be someone who just is ready to dip their toe in the water with volunteering and isn't sure of what might be a good fit for them. They can attend this session and someone speaks with them and gets to the bottom of what might be a good fit in terms of what their time commitments are, what their interests are. And then usually after that, they will, as a committee chair, then you get an email saying, hey, we have someone who's interested in volunteering and participating on your committee. And that seems to be working really well. I feel like we do a pretty good job here in Illinois trying to onboard our volunteers and then groom them as well into leadership. We're really big. I'm sure, Kelly, I know you've heard us use this saying in our meetings, but that tap on the shoulder as to, you know, who would be a good person to sort of step in and, you know, begin with co-chairing and then chairing and then maybe be a good board member and so on. So it's really helpful. And I think it sort of removes some of that, the unknowns and the fear that people might have about volunteering. Like, am I getting in over my head? What am I getting in for? And it gives them that chance again to ask questions and then, you know, have committees suggested to them that might be a good fit for what they're able to do. So we're finding that works really well. We've been doing that now for a few years, and it's been an amazing experience.
Yeah, and you guys have a really good page on your website. I'll drop it in the chat if anyone wants to take a look at it around committees and volunteering and having a description of what the different committees are, kind of the overall benefit of also volunteering. Because I think sometimes in the messaging with volunteering, it's, what can you do for us? But there's also what can we do for you? And I think sometimes that piece is missing a little bit. So I like how that's broken out and kind of at the top too of here's some benefits that you're getting from volunteering as well. So I
We're-
dropped that ahead in there too.
Thank you. And we're also being much more mindful in that volunteer onboarding process to say, well, what are you hoping to get from this experience? I did hear someone say, and that is sometimes all it is I want a designation or a redesignation and I need points, so I'm here. And then there are times where, people they really want to just have an outlet to do other volunteer things, use a different side of their brain. And CAI sort of helps them be able to do that in addition to what they do on the day-to-day basis. Um, there was something else I was gonna say I thought was really good, and now it just went away. I'm sorry. But yeah, the volunteer commission has been an excellent way for us to onboard and keep our volunteers. We also, and I have it coming up this month, is our committee chair meeting. We do try and do that in person. We have that twice a year. If you have to attend by Zoom, you can, but we have normally pretty decent attendance. Kelly, I know you've attended those sessions with us, and we tend to have a lot of fun. There's a lot of great ideas flowing through the committees and collaboration, and that's kind of what works for us.
Yeah, and I just to piggyback on to that, Kathy, if anyone has the ability to get your chairs together, especially before you put your strategic plan together for the year, I think being a part of that and seeing kind of the flow of ideas and having them be a part of what that next year is going to look like, what that strategic direction is. Afterwards, talking with people, they find that value and they've had that discussion with their committees. So they've gotten the feedback from their committee and now they're bringing it to the group and then the group's bringing it to the board and then the board puts it all together. So it's really this buy-in from all the different key players of the organization.
And that's
So
basically the agenda for our upcoming committee chair share session is give us your ideas because next year we need to start reworking our strategic plan. So we very much when it's time to rework the strategic plan, we very much make that the focus of the meeting and get everyone's participation in that. And it also shows the committees how they can work together on certain projects. And that's been going really very, very well. It's very exciting. There's lots of energy in the room. I know what else I was going to mention, and I don't know if other chapters do this, but once a year, we also send out a recommitment form, a volunteer recommitment form. And so basically it says, and it's only between you and our office, right? So it's not like it's going to the population at large or anything like that. It's basically saying, hey, you're on this committee, this one. Do you want to stay on these committees? Do you want to change in committee? Do you aspire to be a chair or a co-chair? So we're asking for that feedback. We want to know that. We want to make sure, that also that people are participating and not just on a committee in name only to have their name show up on something. We really do want them to feel engaged, and we want to be engaged with them. So if you're not happy on this one, we'll move you to another, or if you just don't want to volunteer anymore because of whatever reasons, life happens, job change, things like that. We give them that very quiet, very peaceful sort of, fade away type thing. And that's usually in August that we do that. And that's also been a very nice tool in making sure people remain engaged and happy or working on committees that they're going to get the most out of it. And and be able to make those changes and transitions. That's what I
Great.
wanted.
Thanks, Kathy. So we're gonna go to Austin and then we'll go to you, Tom.
Awesome. And I put my city or my chapter.
Or
first.
Andrew,
No, it's-
sorry. I saw Austin
I did
first.
that, and then I saw everyone else did the other way, and I was like, I'm gonna leave this, and I guarantee people are gonna
Leave
think
it
my
to
name's
me.
Austin, but I'll respond to either. I had I appreciate everything you shared, Kathy. I had two follow-ups. One, would you be willing to share that volunteer recommitment form? Because I love that idea. That'd be awesome. Because I'm all about stealing good ideas from other chapters. And then you also mentioned a new member orientation. If there's any, like, I jumped on your website to see if I could find any like details, and it doesn't be right now. If anything you could share on that, that sounds really interesting to me, because I think for us, I'm coming into the presidency for next year. Committees coincidentally is one of our top items we've been thinking about. So this is well timed, but also like membership engagement. So the fact you have like a structured orientation sounds really cool. So I just love to get as much from you as I can on that.
Absolutely. I just made a note to myself.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so Kathy, if you want to get that over to us, we'll make sure we get it into the toolkit, and then we can, in that weekly email, once it's in that toolkit, we'll attach that link to both of those. Because if I remember correctly, I think there's a PowerPoint that Cheryl has or something that might be useful during the new member orientation. I thought there was some type of visual,
Yeah,
if I remember.
We just
correctly.
actually gave that new member orientation a couple weeks ago. She and I
Yeah.
did. And then so you want that and you want that volunteer recommitment.
Yep.
Okay.
I see a lot of head nods to that. So I think they're not I don't think Andrew's the only one for that.
And
All right.
then, okay, gotcha.
Yep. All right, Tom, go ahead.
So how deep does your chapter or your CED get into the recruitment of the volunteers? Is that something more that the board goes out for your chapters? Does the CED do it? Is that a strange question? And the only reason that I say that is unfortunately our chapter has gone through a lot of CEDs in the past 5 years, and I think so that kind of puts it on the board, but because it's like a continual training process for a CED, and then they leave, and then you get another one, and you're training, and they really don't get the knowledge set of the makeup and the demographics of the members. So that kind of puts it on the board and the other members to push other members into the chapters. But is there something that the CED can do better, or in your chapters that are doing to recruit volunteers and committee members?
I think our CED is always on the lookout for people, and we've had her for a very long time. We're very, very blessed with her. She's always I spying, because if we get a new member, chances are she's right there and gets to know them first. So in those conversations, she can begin to say, hey, I think you'd be great on this committee, or if you ever think of volunteering, this might be a good fit for you. Come to the volunteer orientation, see if it's for you, that sort of a thing. And then with our committees, each committee has a staff liaison, but I realize we're a little bit bigger of a chapter. I don't know what kind of staff other chapters might have. We typically have 3 between our CED and then 2 others that more or less take on the responsibility of being the staff liaison to our committees.
Mhm.
And they attend every meeting.
Yeah. Sarah, I had seen that you had come off mute for a second. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have a follow-up. I mean, for wondering what, is there any sort of factor that contributes to the turnover of the CEDs? Maybe there is something there that the CEDs feel overwhelmed if they're having to recruit as well as do, other operational pieces. I do think, I mean, I sit on a board. I've sat, Western Oregon is definitely bigger. I'm currently the president of the Central Oregon, so now working with a smaller board, and in both cases, constantly, it's us volunteers or us boards that have to take on trying to recruit. And I do that with my CED, so that she doesn't have to feel alone, but it does seem like it's a daunting task for one person to do. So, Central Oregon just had the reverse trade show, their first ever. And it went really well. And while at that trade show, that's where we started talking, to other business partners and managers there to say, hey, would you ever consider a committee? And really just trying to be active at the event with the agenda of, I'm here to talk to some managers, but actually I'm also here to wear the CAI hat as a volunteer to try to recruit for the committee. So just always trying to take the opportunities to do that as a board member or volunteer, a chair. So.
Yeah, and Sarah, I think you bring up a really good point. I know some chapters I've seen at their events, whether it's an education event or the trade show, that if someone's a part of a committee, they have a little flag tag that they put onto their badge. So people are starting to recognize, oh, there's committees here. Oh, that person has a flag. What does it say? Oh, it says committee member or just committee, or maybe it's a specific committee, depending on, again, the size and what kind of recognition you want to give. But that's just getting in front of people that, hey, we have committees. There are opportunities to volunteer in these types of cases. I've also seen it, some chapters have a membership committee that reaches out to new members when they join. And it's kind of, they're the go-between person between the chapter and the new member, and making sure, okay, are you getting the value? Are you coming to an event? I'd like to invite you, make sure that you feel welcome coming to different chapter things. The newsletter came out, just wanted to make sure you received it. Do you have any trouble logging in online? But also communicating, we do have committees. So if you're ready to, take that step forward and you're interested, let's have a conversation about that. So I think it's also the knowledge that there's pieces out there, because I've noticed sometimes people go, oh, things are running smoothly. They're running well. They don't need any more help. And so they're sitting in the background because the education events aren't going good. The trade show's great. And so why put myself in there? They're fine. They don't need anybody else. So sometimes it's that perspective too. And it's just reminding people that there's always the ability for you to come in and to get new blood in. It doesn't have to be the good old boys club, that we're always welcoming new people in here. So I've seen a couple chapters do that. So that might be helpful to moving forward. Jim, you had your hand raised. Did you want to bring something up?
Yeah, I think this is one of the reasons why we did term limits on the chairs, is because we have one committee that's kind of a good old girls club, and they're very, as Chris is smiling, they're very inclusive of themselves. And one of the chairs got elected to the board, and she still thinks she's on the committee, and she still thinks she's the chair, and it's causing issues for our CED and all kinds of fun stuff. So that's also why one of the things that I'm mixing up next year is I'm going to take, like, I've been the liaison of the education committee since I've been on the board, and I'm on year 3 on the board. So we're going to mix it up next year, and we're going to have everyone kind of get up and switch committees and try a new committee liaison so we can do that. And I think one of the other things that Chris and we discussed in yesterday's board meeting, and it became a thing, in our chapter, we typically limit participation on a committee to no more than 2 people per company. This particular committee just fought tooth and nail to have 3 people per company, and so we agreed to it. But it's a question of what's right and what's wrong. Of course, as the chapter grows, maybe we shouldn't establish a number. But I do know that there are people that don't want to serve on this committee because they feel like it's all people from X management company.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point with that, Jim, of kind of, does it feel like one company, whether it's a business partner or management company, that they're kind of leading the efforts, and then is it more favorable to that one company versus CAI as an organization? And sometimes it's just a visual of that, of people are kind of feeling that way because they see all of the same name on the volunteer list, versus it actually being a reality of it. So it's good to keep that in mind as well with that. Does anyone else have any of those limits of only a certain number of people from the same company can be on a committee. I see some head nods with that. Have you run into any issues with people thinking that it's, being led by one company or not? Sarah, I know you would come off mute for a second.
Well, I mean, yeah, the Central Oregon chapter definitely had this issue of being run by a particular company, like the whole chapter being run by a particular company. And, it was, as you grow, you have to get that stomped out. So that was one of my main objectives, getting onto the board and having that vision of, we got to get past that. And, so I think it is important we do spread it out. And if there is, two people from the same company, just split them up and put them on different committees. There's other ways to spread it out and make it a bit more right, I guess is the best way to say it. So
Great. Thanks, Sarah. The other question I have for the group is, do you feel that you have the right committees in place for your chapter? And I know, again, we've got people on today from small chapters to some of our largest chapters here. So the type of committees and the number of committees are definitely going to range. But do you feel like you have the ones in place that are helping the chapter go in the right direction?
I know for Greater Los Angeles, we did a restructure of our committees this last year. So we went from like 15 committees to 9. So we have community outreach, diversity, equity, and inclusion, education and development, executive summit, golf, the LSC, marketing and PR, programs and expo, and social. And one of the biggest questions that we've had is our education and development handles all of our webinars. So we do homeowner leadership webinars and then also manager specific webinars. And one of my concerns was that the committee was made up of mostly those who had joined our manager education committee. And so I was concerned that we're kind of doing a disservice to the homeowner education portion, because we don't have people particularly passionate about that. They're more passionate about developing their managers. And so that's a question that we had going into 25 is, do we break that back out? The structure for the rest of the others seems to be working well and going really well, but that education and development, taking care of manager education and homeowner leadership education, kind of seemed to be a point of struggle for this year, trying to figure out if that was appropriate or if homeowner leadership and engagement needed their own committee.
Does anyone have education for your homeowners separate from your regular one, Jason?
Sort of. We tried something different this year, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure it worked 100%. We broke up our committees a little differently and did based on the 3 types, right? So we had a manager-centric committee, an HOA, a homeowner leader committee, and a business partner committee, and with the intent that each one would kind of either run its own education or events and things like that. Surprisingly, even though our homeowner leaders have been very small, that was probably the most successful committee. And the committee that I expected would really kind of nail it was the business partner one. And they totally just, I would say they failed completely this year. So one of the things that we're talking literally this morning, talking about for strategic planning is, do we try this committee structure and give it one more year and see where we go? Or do we go back to the more traditional discussion like we're having here, where it's, events and this one and, that kind of thing. And that's literally on the table for our strategic planning later this month to play with.
Thank you for that. Let us know how that goes.
Our education and development committee, we handle the education for the homeowners, education for managers. We do a coaching to credentials program for like mentorship for those obtaining their credentials. And then we also have our college curriculum efforts under that committee too. So that was the other thing that we were looking at as far as just the workload for that committee in itself. Does it warrant its own or some kind of breakout? One of the goals that we wanted to work on was also homeowner engagement. So we were thinking about making it a homeowner education and engagement committee, so that they can be tasked with the engagement portion as well.
Great, thank you, Amy. Chris, go ahead.
We just this last year, and Jim might be able to speak better to this, we had purchased a competitor at a significant amount, which involved about 400 members, and some were business partners, but about half were homeowners. So because they were used to more frequent education, our education committee made a point to have homeowner only sessions. We do that quarterly. They're free, and it's working out great. They fill up and we maximize, or we max out the space that we have available. Now, since then, another competitor has come up who used to be a longtime CAI member. And just this last week, we found out that they have like 400 members. So, and they are going into other states. So be warned, they just announced that they're going to have 7 chapters in Minnesota, and they have been requested for Austin and a few other states. But so we are trying to retain our homeowner education.
Can we
Jim?
ask more about this? This is the first I'm hearing of anything like of this.
You mean
Like what?
Of this
competitor?
competitor, what, yeah, I guess, and maybe they're not entering our state and I just haven't heard of anything, but I mean, how would I find out more information about whatever this is?
It's HOA Leadership Network, and
Yep.
he was part of the CAI like research and development years ago. He's got a lot of knowledge. He's been in this, education for about 20 years. He's retired, and he has gotten another person that lives in his HOA, which was a marketing executive for huge banking system. So they've done an incredible job, and I do go to their education events, but they are the buzz. So they just opened up 4 chapters this year. They've been around for like 5 years, and they've just exploded. And then they are going to Houston, Texas, Omaha, Milwaukee. So that's what their intention is this next year, and then might go nationwide. So
Yeah,
and it's all and it is all free because of sponsorship. So they just say grab board members. The confusing thing is I talked to a few homeowners in the last week, and they think we're the same. So we're not the same, but the same vendors are presenting at our events and at their events. So that's the confusing thing.
yeah.
We have members of our board presenting at those events. That's a whole nother problem.
And when it comes to competition, I was going to say, Tom, some of our other Florida folks, you guys know that pretty well. You guys live in an area that's very heavy in competition from other organizations and business partners.
Yeah,
themselves.
we have in Florida a little group called CAMU, and they put on a really good show. I mean, I've been to it just to see, what our competition is, but they don't, at the end of the day, they don't have everything CAI offers. So it's a great steak or salmon lunch, but I don't think at the end of the day it's very beneficial. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
I think
agree.
that's the thing too. Yeah. And just to let you all know, we do keep a pulse on that from the national level. And so if it's something to be a concern or something like that, again, you can either reach out to us or we'll be reaching out to you if we think it is as well. A lot of the times you in the local markets will see it before we do. But I know, again, Tim, who's the executive director from Minnesota, him and I have had some conversations about this organization specifically. But again, we do kind of monitor that and see what's the pulse, and is it a manager specific or homeowner specific items, or how is that interacting? So if it was of a deep concern, we would be contacting you as well, Sarah. So
Can I ask if anybody else does an executive summit?
You mean
Andrew?
like for the chapters in our state?
Correct.
As of last week, we just did our first one ever for Texas. So
Okay.
yes, but that was our first time ever doing it.
How did it turn out for you guys?
I think very positive. So for everyone else, so there's 4 different chapters in Texas here. And we had good participation from all 4 chapters attend, did 2 days, had a moderator, and I think it was really helpful. So, you know, Austin and San Antonio are smaller chapters, 400-ish members. Dallas, Houston are 800, something like that, just for context. So for us sort of smaller folks, it's helpful to steal those good ideas and hopefully they learned a little something from us. But I think almost everyone who attended really seemed to view it positively and help us try to row in the same direction at a state level. Because a lot of us business partners are in all or many of these chapters. And so I think it was successful and we plan to do it again.
All right. We just find we have a competitor, CACM, here in California, and they hold an executive summit. Then, of course, headquarters holds theirs too. And so we've been trying to put one on, but it's something that our CED actually took the advice from her water cooler talks and kind of did an evaluation of ours. And we're only getting about 35 people coming to those, but the staff hours put into it are obscene, and we're lucky if we break even. So we're actually even talking about sunsetting that for our chapter. But I was just curious if anybody had experience with that and just kind of how it goes for you guys. Kelly, you smiled. Was there something behind that?
No, it's very interesting because I've heard a lot of directions in both ways, but I think you're doing things right, Amy. You know, you're talking to people, you're looking at the picture of volunteer hours. It's interesting because we have our CED retreat next week, and one of the things we're talking about is how do you look at a program and really see the value in it and making sure that this program's still right for the chapter, and looking at it from not just a financial piece, but a volunteer hours, a staff hours, you know, the attendance, the makeup of the attendees that are coming, and the purpose of the event. And so I think that fits right into the conversation that we're going to be having with a lot of the CEDs next week, around that, and really taking a look at, you know, are the programs that we're doing providing the level of value and quality that we want to as an organization. So so that's great that you guys are having that conversation, Amy. That's more of why I smiled. It made my heart happy a little bit that we're having the right discussion.
We're actually talking about possibly making it more of a leadership summit rather than specific to C-suite or executives, just because we see there's kind of like a disconnect in the path, the career path, and those that, like, I'm an on-site GM. If I wanted to move into an executive role, where do I kind of learn what that looks like, and how do I go about that? And so we're looking at a leadership summit for 25 rather than a specific executive summit.
Great. All right, we have about 15 minutes left today. Is there anything else anyone wanted to bring up, or something that happened in conversation that you wanted more clarity on or more time to discuss? Letting everyone, I see some thinking faces on and some not. So
I just want to throw out there, we formed our past presidents council this year, and we kind of use them as an ad hoc, just an advisory committee, if you will. So that's been extremely helpful for things like us talking about our term limits and some of the successes and failures at the same point. We need to know all of that. And so having those past presidents at our fingertips to be able to call them together to ask some questions about their experience has been amazing. We kept our charter very vague for the purpose of being able to use them when we needed them. But it was also a wonderful way to honor our past presidents and their volunteership for the chapter. And we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from the past presidents about being reached out for some guidance and some advisory committee tasks. So it's been a good one for us.
Amy, how far back past presidents do you go? Any or all living or what?
So we went way back to like the 80s, and we put it out to everybody asking like, hey, if you're interested, please let us know. And surprisingly, we got about 25 of our past presidents involved in that. And all of them were so excited to be tapped into from the chapter, and just they were so excited. And almost like re-engaging with them. And we've had even some of them like sign up to be on committees and like just being our advocates. We were talking about looking for volunteers, and they have been one of the biggest advocates for the chapter and looking for volunteers for committees, because a lot of them are, you know, attorneys or business partners, and they know the movers and the shakers and the doers in the industry. And so they've given us a lot of leads on some great people to come onto the committee structures as well.
Would you be willing to share your charter? You mentioned that it was very vague, but.
Absolutely. I'll send it over to Kelly and she can put it in the.
Thank you, Amy.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else utilize past presidents or, you know, kind of those people who have been involved with the chapter and have just that great institutional knowledge about things? Do you include them in strategic planning or in any of those future thinking discussions? ahead, Chris.
Minnesota did our first past presidents meeting last year, and it was great success. We had a lot more people than we anticipated, and we intend on doing it either every other year or even possibly every year. So we had specific questions, took notes, got our initial feedback. We don't have an ongoing meeting set up, but we think their information is incredibly valuable. And a lot of them are still active in the industry, so they do give feedback here and there. But yeah, I highly suggest it. So
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Oh, thank you guys for being so collaborative on today's call. I think it was great. So I think there's lots of really great feedback, and that's because of your participation. So thank you.